Yes, I hear you. You want me to analyze other racing games. Please just let me do this one first, okay? Today we are analyzing Crash Time. Hi everyone, as always Patrick here. If you're already subscribed, make sure you turn on notifications, otherwise YouTube won't tell you if I posted anything. If you are new to the channel, make sure you watch until the very end and consider subscribing if you like it. Okay, Crash Time. Crash Time is a racing game developed by Synetic and published by Crave Entertainment and RTL Interactive back in 2007. This Crash Time is unique because it's not an open world racing game like most games in this series. Instead, it's a linear racing game. And just like every single game in this series, this is the game I have played once back when it came out, and I am revisiting it many years later. Does it hold up? Let's find out. As always, let's start the analysis video by analyzing the graphics. For a game released in 2007, the graphics are decent, but they are nothing special. This game obviously isn't going to win any awards for the best graphics, but the graphics are fine. I've seen a lot of people say that the graphics of Crash Time 1 are bad, but I think people are saying this because they remember the better looking games from 2007. And I'm not talking about racing games, I'm talking about, Crysis. Let's be honest, nothing could compete with Crysis at that time. And considering the fact that Crash Time 1 is a budget game, well, low budget game to be exact, the graphics are fine. Yeah, there's not much I can say about the overall quality of the graphics. What you see is what you get. Thankfully, I can say something more about the graphical options the game gives you. The game perfectly supports widescreen resolutions. I had no problems running this game at 1080p. The game also has anisotropic filtering, there is anti-aliasing, there is VSync, the game runs at high frame rates, even though this footage doesn't really show it, but the game does in fact run at high frame rates. That's all well and good, but there are two big problems. Problem number one, like I've said before, there is VSync, but it is showcased as presentation interval, quite a difficult word, and most people probably doesn't know that it means VSync. I mean, I didn't know that it was VSync. You have two options in the game launcher. You have interval immediate and interval 1. Interval immediate is VSync off, interval 1 is VSync on. Why is it labeled like this? Wouldn't that be easier to just call it VSync and call it a day? But there's a bigger problem, and that problem is the problem number 2. There's no FOV slider. Now here's the thing. Synetic games are well known for their modability. There are so many mods for this game. And I have to ask, if there is any modder watching this video by any chance, is there a workaround for the FOV? Please let me know in the comments down below. What about the game's stability? It didn't crash, it didn't lag, but it stuttered a lot when I was recording. The funny thing is, it didn't stutter at all when I wasn't recording. Well, I don't know. I guess recording does make a difference. Overall, this is a decent PC release. Sure, some options are missing, but still, it's a decent PC release. Now let's talk about the story. In this game you play as quite a number of characters actually. There are 8 cases in the game and every case has a different story. Let me describe the first case in the game called Beginner's Luck. Don't worry, I won't spoil anything if you haven't played the game. Samir and Chris are sitting in their car and they watch the Autobahn. A speed fiend drives past them and then they initiate pursuit. They successfully catch the speed fiend. Later on, the boss calls Samir and Chris to come to the precinct. There's a cadet waiting for them there. I'm going to stop myself there because if I describe anything more, I will spoil a lot, even though it's just one of 8 different stories. But still, I'll just leave the rest for you to discover. Like I've said before, each case has a different story, and some of them are better than others, some of them are worse than others. Like I've said before, I'll leave everything for you to discover. I'm not going to share my opinions about those stories, because most of them are pretty basic. Like I've said before, some of them are better, some of them are worse. That's all you need to know about those stories. As you all probably know already, I always make a joke about the terrible voice acting in this series, but this time I'm going to talk about it later, because I have a bit more to talk about. For a while we are going to ignore the voice acting, because now it's time to talk about the gameplay. I don't have a lot to say, but I will still think of something. The game is arcadey, there is no simulation, so yeah, you will be able to make sharp turns without any problems, because the cars have a lot of grip. You don't get a lot of options when it comes to modifying the handling and the physics. Well, actually, you can't change anything about those things at all. But I should mention 2 options the game gives you. Actually, 2 options, sorry, minor mistake. Um, those 2 options are the brake assist and the arcade plus mode. The brake assist speaks for itself. When you turn it on, your brakes are more effective. If you turn it off, they are less effective. They are still effective, just less effective. But the Arcade Plus mode is a big thing. This can completely change the way you play your game. When you play using the Arcade Plus mode turned on, well, your car handles perfectly. You will never spin out, you will almost never crash, and you will have a fun time playing the game. When you turn it off, well, it's still very easy to drive. You can just spin out a bit more. I was playing with every assist turned off, and I had a good time with the driving. I didn't crash a lot. I didn't really spun out, even though I turned off the Arcade Plus mode off. And yeah, there's not much I can say here. It's still fun even without the assists. Is it unrealistic? Yeah, sure, but it's so much fun when you just jump over a ramp and you feel like a Superman. Well, for 5 seconds. Now let's quickly talk about the damage model. The damage model is also improved from Alarm for Cobra 11 Nitro. The deformations are now much more realistic, and the damages are also good. They can also affect your vehicle handling in a way. The sequels would improve on this, but it's still a huge improvement over Nitro. The cases also give you 3 difficulty modes: easy, normal and hard, as you would expect from a game. And those difficulties work in a different way compared to other games or most games. Instead of making the AI harder by giving them more speed or something, game gives you several missions, and the difficulties can change the objective. For example, the mission you're watching right now, well, I have to make 12 jumps. Keep in mind that I am playing on hard mode, and the because I'm playing on hard mode, I have to make 12 jumps. If I'm playing on normal, it's 10. I have to make 10 jumps, and when I'm playing on easy mode, I have to make 8 jumps. And also there's a different damage limit. For example, on easy mode it's 30%, normal mode 20%, hard mode that you're seeing right now 10%. Each mission changes something. Sometimes it's the time limit to get to your destination, sometimes it's something completely different, and sometimes it's something that doesn't make sense. More about that later. Some of those cases are easy, some of them are perfectly balanced, some of them are hard, and some of them just don't make any sense. And by that I mean it's way more difficult than it should be. Again, more on that later. Now let's talk about the cars. The game doesn't have many cars, but when you think about it, it doesn't need to have many cars. There are many car categories in this game. There are normal cars, there are police cars, there are sports cars, and then you have also some strong and sometimes silly ones like the tank. Most cars are different from each other, but they're not that different. The biggest difference between the cars are their top speed. Some vehicles are pretty fast, some vehicles are a bit slower, some are incredibly slow, and some of them are hilarious. And that's all you need to know about the cars. There's honestly not much I can say here. Actually, wait, there is one more thing I have to say. Compared to Alarm for Cobra 11 Nitro, the game has more vehicles with some tuned variants of returning vehicles. The returning vehicles also look better and have badges on the front, rear and wheel caps. Alarm for Cobra 11 Nitro didn't have those. Now let's talk about the maps. There are two maps in the game, the city map and the Autobahn map. The maps in Alarm for Cobra 11 Nitro were nicely detailed despite the fact that they were not designed for free roaming. In Alarm for Cobra 11 Nitro, you had a long stretch of Autobahn, a bit of country roads, and a nicely detailed city. Crash Time 1 expands on this. The maps in Crash Time 1 are much better than the ones in Nitro. Instead of a long Autobahn stretch that has fake exits, you've got an Autobahn loop with a town and an industrial area in between, along with a huge construction site. The city map looks more alive too, and there's even a sewage system where the player can drive. And that is a recipe you need to create a decent game. But even though the game is decent, there are some problems. Yep, it's time to talk about the bad qualities of the game. There are only 3 things that I can really talk about. Problem number 1. Using the manual transmission can be difficult as there is no tachometer or tachometer. I don't know how to say this, sorry. There is a shift indicator, but an RPM is still important for when to downshift. You can rely on the car sounds though. Problem number 2. Terrible voice acting and translation in the English language. That's why I've said earlier that I want to leave this part for last, or I said that I want to talk about it later. Yeah, the soundtrack, the voice acting is really bad. Everyone sounds bland and bored. It's like they're don't even try. And then the third and the biggest problem of the game, some cases can be really unforgiving, yet it's less so than in World Racing 2, another game made by Synetic. Let me give you an example of an unfair, unbalanced mission. Do you remember that part of the video where I was jumping on ramps? Yeah, the way you do those jumps is just never explained to the player. When you play on easy mode, you can easily do those 8 jumps because, well, you have 2 laps. One lap contains 4 jumps, 4 ramps, so you can do this mission on easy mode without any problems. But when you're playing on normal and hard, you have to do either 10 or 12 jumps. But there are only 8 ramps, well, in 2 laps in total. So how do you even get those 2 or 4 extra jumps? If you try to go back to redo the same jump, the game doesn't count that. So, and there are no more ramps. You can't jump off anywhere. You can only use those ramps to jump, and you can't repeat the same jump over and over again. So, what do? Oh, my bad. I'm supposed to land perfectly on the other side of the ramp, since that counts as a second jump. Because that totally makes sense. Do you know what's the worst part about this? There are multiple missions like this one. Yeah, I'm in a loss for words. How can someone do missions like that with this broken logic? I just don't get it. Oh man. You know what? I better stop myself right here before I start another rant. You see, this is making me so angry that I can't even talk properly. So yeah, I think it will be better if I stop right now. In conclusion, Crash Time 1 is a perfect example of a decent game. There's no reason to hate it, but there's also no reason to love it. I would say that there's a lot more good than bad when it comes to Crash Time 1. And that is obviously a good thing. This game has a lot of good things, good damage models, amazing physics, decent graphics, decent sound design, decent soundtrack, decent maps, and a lot of them works on paper. Everything feels connected. Sometimes it feels, well, actually pretty good. So, do I recommend the game? Yes, I think it's still worth checking out despite the fact it's been, I think, 16 years since release now. Man, time flies by. Well, I would say this, normally I would say go buy the game, but the thing is, the game is not available on any digital stores, like at all. The game used to be available on Gamersgate back in the day, but now it was removed for unknown reasons. So nowadays the only way you can play the game is to get yourself a physical copy, but that can be tricky. While the game has good, decent DRM, that being Solid Shield DRM, you should be able to launch the game and play it without any problems. But there are some copies, like the Polish copies, that use Star Force DRM. That's not good. Thankfully, this uses the Star Force 5 DRM, so it won't destroy your PC. It is compatible with modern systems. But even if you get the Star Force copy, which I don't recommend by the way, do yourself a favor and try to crack the game. I'm usually against this, but trust me, this will save your PC. Trust me. But that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to say in this analysis video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.